Okie dokie. Let's get started slightly late. I was trying to put together something real quick. So basically I wanted to start thanking my patrons at the beginning of the live stream. For those who don't know, I have a Patreon. You go to patreon.com pspeed42. If you're interested in the open source stuff, that's a nice way to contribute. Buy me a donut or whatever. It also gets you access to the private Discord channels. The Discord's of course open to anyone. Just have to send me a message for an invite. Just gotta keep the casuals out. Haha. So yep. So check it out if you want. There'll be maybe some other benefits and stuff coming up. I don't know. You get early access to the code if you're a developer for the open source stuff. You get early access until I release that next year. And so here are my current patrons. Thank you guys, especially you superheroes. Yeah, sorry about the Stefan, or I don't know how you pronounce his name, got name got a little messed up. Okay, so let's get started. What I wanted to talk about first was sort of how the world is set up. When we run Mythruna, I currently have the debug grid turned on, so we can kind of see how the world is separated out, because this will be important for how we do positional sounds. As anybody who's on last week knows, we started getting the positional sounds in place. We have sort of the system sounds. Of course, I have mine muted right now. I got tired of hearing them every time we started up. Anyway, so there's sound in the game, but there's no sound in the game. And so we're going to get that hooked up. Last week we put some test objects in, scripted those so that they have sounds attached to them, but we don't have the client-side part that would actually play the sounds for the player. We started writing that, but now we've got to start managing what they call it, interest, right? So I was going to go over how Mythruna's world grid, and actually this is sort of the default setup for the open source libraries called, there's an open source library that I'm developing called MWorld, and it's built on top of the MBlock library. MBlock is what takes an array of block types and factories and turns them into the geometry, and then MWorld is what organizes this into a big grid and does the paging and the client server networking and all that allows you to page this over the network. So currently what we see is I'm standing inside this grid here, and yeah, there's the two sound objects we put down last time. And so anyway, so I've got the debug gridding turned on, and I'll go over real quick how that relates to. I'm going to go ahead and exit the game because I don't want to tax my machine too much in case it overheats. It's getting kind of hot up here. Okay, so I created some visuals to try to describe this. So those of you familiar with Minecraft probably know that it's built in chunks, which are like these long, tall. They're like 16 by 16. I actually don't know exactly how Minecraft is organized in its world. Mythruna does it in 3D, so each of these is a 32 by 32 by 32. I call them leafs because in the old days there was nodes and leaves, and that's like a graph term. So I thought there's this hierarchy of the world, but I kept it. It's called leaf data, and there's fluid data, and there's one more, I think, light data. So they're all separate, but they're all on these 32 by 32 by 32 meter leaf sized blocks. And then the world is organized into columns, which are kind of like, when I originally started writing Mythruna, everything was based on these leaves, and I found out that 99% of the time I was loading everything in a column, because to do lighting you have to project the sun down from the top. If you're generating terrain, you have to decide where the surface of the terrain is and plug things into it, you end up pulling most of the things in anyway. And so I found it easier just to treat everything as columns. So a column is 32 by 672 by 32. This is the column of the size of a column in new Mythruna. And then the world beyond that is organized into tiles, which are 1024 by 1024 by 1024. And that's sort of what the far terrain and everything else is loading. And indeed, when we look at the map grid, which I'll refresh our memories in a minute when we go back into the game. When we look at the map grid, the grid on the map is these 1024 by 1024 tiles. So the world generates tile-based, as far as placing trees, and they're sort of organized that way. Now to drill in a little deeper, to compare this with old Mythruna and new Mythruna. So old Mythruna, if this is sea level here, the old sea depth was 64 meters. The new sea depth in new Mythruna is 128 meters. And with that old sea depth here, old Mythruna's max build height was here. I think we generated up to here, and then the max build height was up to here. And new Mythruna generates up to about here, I think. Maybe here, and then the max build height's up here. So considerably more height. And that means when you're up here, you can see considerably farther, and so on and so forth. And that's probably a topic of a whole other discussion, which is why I had to do far terrain and stuff, just because I wanted higher build height. Plus it looks cooler, etc., etc. So that's how that is organized. And I thought this is useful because when we talk about things, I like to use terms, and I wanted to kind of define them. So this is a column, this is a tile. These I call leafs. Sometimes I'll call them cells, but cells are often the little blocks. So I try to call the little 32 by 32, the little 1 meter things that represent a block. I try to call those blocks, and these grid cells, to avoid confusion. I'll try to be as clear as possible. So why do we care about all this? Well, when you think about it, when we're, see, where did I get a pen? Let me make a new layer. I got a new layer. Where's the pen in Photopia? Right. There it is. It always starts out as a weird size. Anyway, so let's say my player is here in this. Let's say we're standing here in this column. So this is let's say this is a whole tile, 1024 by 1024 meters, which is 32 by 32 columns. Wow, Photopia is really slow when we're in. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Sorry, you guys got to watch ads for a minute. So then we render out from a particular radius. Like if our grid radius was 1, we would render just these squares. The square we're in and the immediate surrounding squares. I think the default radius for Mythruna right now when you first load it is 3, which is super short for old Mythruna, but with new Mythruna having the far terrain and stuff, it really helps a lot. And that allows me to do a little more fancy stuff with the geometry going forward, because I don't have to support, But anyway, the idea is that once you walk over this line, we drop everything here. We drop all that stuff and we load in the new one. And so at any given time, we only have this much data loaded around the player. And that grid or conveyor system that moves around us, filters our whole world view. And I think right now we have it so that objects and sounds will load just in these immediate surrounding cells. And it doesn't seem like really far, but you got to figure that on average, this is more than 32 meters, probably closer to 48 meters on average, never less than 32 meters. And that's a pretty far way to hear, object sound effects. And potentially we could have, a larger range for loud sounds. And if we decide to, we can move the radius out here. But when I talk about grid radius and things like that, when we get into the nitty-gritty of loading sounds around the player, this is what I mean. And I may come back and refer to this grid if it seems necessary. But that's the keys, like tile, column, leaf, sometimes cells, and then 32 by 32 by 32 blocks within there, with a block being a meter on edge. Okay. So then let's go back into the game for just a second before we start coding. If you happen to be watching live and have questions, feel free to ask. I'm trying to kind of teach a little bit in this one, though we do have a lot of work to do. So let's see if we can get started here in a second. But I want to reset the context of what we're doing. So when we're in here, and now we can see the grid, because I've turned on the debug grid as mentioned before. This red grid cell here that I'm in, this leaf data cell, I think up in the HUD, do I talk about? No. I don't, just position. Okay, I used to show like leaf ID and things up there. Another thing I mentioned, that in the physics system they call these, in the 2D sense, they're bins, because they're not divided vertically. They're just divided on the columns, and they're still 32 by 32. But the physics system, because things tend to fall in physics, it doesn't bother to partition vertically, because it just creates too much churn as objects transition from one boundary to another. Anyway, we see these two objects sitting here. They are within the 1 by 1, they're with the 1 block radius. If I fly up and I move back, now I'm in this grid, this red cell, you can see it here, and we can still see them. If I fly 1 more block away, those two little sound objects should disappear. Yep, they just went away. So now, if I had objects here, we would see them here. And if I fly back over this grid cell, we see them pop back in. Popping is something we'll have to work on. But already those are pretty small, and we're in a kind of extreme case here. I think they do it vertically too, although the grid vertically can be different than the grid horizontally. Yeah, I have it set up differently. So I think you have to go really high before they disappear. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's right. The yellow grids mean there's terrain in there. I can't tell you. Yeah, we can still see the objects. So I must have set it up to go. Whoa, ruh-roh. Yeah, so there's a known bug. Don't fly too high in the game, kids. There's a known bug that I believe it's the little block selector cursor when I've got the build one selected. The little block selector cursor tries to select a block outside of the world, and it doesn't like that, and I haven't put a clamp on that yet. So anyway, so let's go back in, and we should be falling. Anyway, the object grid may only be set up to be 2D, which is why we never saw those go away. At any rate, so here we would be able to hear these. They'd be far away, and we're almost 32 meters away from them, and so they would be pretty quiet from here. And so already we could see if we cross that boundary, probably they're far enough away we wouldn't hear them. Later on, I'll do sound a little differently when you're underground, because I want to have it propagate, I don't want to say realistically, but propagate like light propagates, in the sense that, if a sound is behind a closed door, we wouldn't necessarily hear it unless it's the kind of sound that would propagate through a closed door. Similar to the way light doesn't pass through solid objects, sounds would be attenuated, as they call it, through solid objects. That's advanced stuff. Right now we're just trying to get these to make noise when we're up close to them, and so we should get started coding. But now you understand what these grids are and why they're going to help debug this particular issue. Okay, now. All right, we're only 20 minutes in. We haven't done any work. Okay, I'm going to close this. All right, so just reinforcing what I was saying earlier. These are the game constants. You know, depth of the sea is 128 meters. Maximum land height 512. So the max map height 0 being, you know, bedrock up to there. That's the max land height. So that's the highest the terrain will generate. And then build height's just another 32 meters above that. And 32 seems small, but 32 is pretty tall for building. Yeah, 32 meters is about an 8 to 10 story building if you think of it that way. So this is sort of the constants on how the world is set up. All right. And so we see back to our sound view state from last week. This is where we have the entity container that watches all the sounds. Currently it loads every sound from everywhere all over the game. That's not a horrible thing to start out with, but we will definitely want to filter that to be just the ones around the player, similar to the way the models work and the map works. And one way to do that is to, so I'm going to look over here at this code real quick. This is the model view state, which is going to do very, very similar things to what we're doing, only in like it does in more complicated ways because it has to worry about rotation and all kinds of stuff like that, animations. And so what we want to do is we grabbed this, we did not grab it. We've got this version reference for the position. This is sort of the way the local game state keeps track of the position of the player in this version reference. So whenever it moves, we can see that it moves. And so if we look for posref here, yeah, so this is where we grab it from the avatar state. The avatar keeps track of what the world position is. And first thing we do when we grab it is we update the view position. So we're going to do that same thing over here. And then what we can do, who has avatar state? Oh, we must do. Yeah, same package we're in. Okay, so similar here. If posref update, if it changed, then we want to update the view position. And in this case, we don't want, so I'll explain what that true false does in a second. We'll copy paste part of the update view position from here just because I don't want to get my math screwed up. So we'll copy this and down to here. So update view position, you know, can force an update, but generally we only want to change our grid references and things when they change. So what we do is we grab from the, so this is the grid, all kinds of stuff that's already set up. So the physics grid is the grid that's set up on the column boundaries, 32 by 32 meters, completely vertical. Yeah, so that explains why the model didn't disappear when we went high above it, only when you move horizontally. So that's a, you know, SimSilica Math D grid, keeps track of the grid, 32 by 32. If we looked at the game constants where that's defined, we should be able to see that. So I keep all this stuff in game constants. So the physics grid cell size, and a grid cell size is 32. So that's keeping our horizontal grid. And so what we do is we take the current position of our center, which is where our eye is, our person, and we get what the 32 by 32 grid cell is for that one. And that's our new center. And if the new center equals the center cell we're keeping track of, and we're not forced to update, then we don't need to do anything. Otherwise, we set the center cell to things. So that's keeping track of that red cell when we looked at the grid before. And then the center world is just like the, you know, fully double precision world location of that particular grid cell is what this is. And this is what we'll base the positions of our spatial audio and stuff off of, because as we move from one grid cell to another, what we consider 0, 0 changes. And this is also important because the world is in, million meter double precision space, but OpenGL and the visualization is dealing with floating point, which is only 32 bits and versus 64 bits, and 32 bits loses precision very quickly. And we start out in the world, like X a million, Y a million in the coordinates, and floating point wouldn't even let us move if we did everything in floating point. There would be no precision left to move. And so we keep track of the center of the world and we log it. So the model view state reset the relative coordinates, which is basically all of the spatials that it kept track of. It goes through, and we know the grid center is moved, so their relative coordinates need to move because their relative to center needs to move. And and so model center, which is going to be different for us. We really wanted to talk about filters too. And this becomes important. So let me look up model center over here. Yeah, so physics goes through. Alright. I keep track of different. Okay, model center. We'll call this sound center. So center. Let's see. What are we setting it to? Yeah. Center grid cell for sound objects used to recreate the entity filter. And surrounding grid cells. Okay, so if the sound center X is different than the center cell X, or sound center Z, is different than the center cell Z, then we want to make those the same. We want to make sure that we're not paying attention to the Y coordinate. And so we will reset the sound filter, and we don't have names or any of that garbage. So it's weird that we do this here, and we don't have large objects, so we don't have to worry about that. So we have a couple more methods to define. We have to define what does reset relative coordinates do, and what does reset sound filter do. So if you remember from last week, this is sort of the more important in the sense that it's not obvious. So last week we created the sound container, which is a way we keep track of the entity set of all sounds that have sound info and spawn position. So if an entity has a sound info and a spawn position, it will be part of this container, which currently in its current form would be all of the sounds in the whole world. If you had a rabbit farting in one city and you were 9 continents over, we would still be here, having that loaded, and that is not supportable. Plus it leads to all kinds of weird cheating because you could monitor sounds from continents away and things. So we need to set up an entity filter here, and we want to filter it to include only the grid cells that are immediately around us. Spawn position conveniently keeps track of the grid cell. I don't think I have it loaded. So spawn position is part of the, right there. Spawn position is part of the MPhys stuff, which is part of the MOS libraries, which are open source, available early access to patrons, blah, 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 the insert ads here. this will be, released hopefully next year as I finalize it, but it keeps track of the bin ID, sort of the unique grid cell that the spawn position is in, and that lets us filter on it. So all we need to do is, when we want to reset the sound filter, we need to calculate what all of the grid cell IDs we want. Create a component filter with that. That's sort of the long and short of what we want to do. And I'm going to cut and paste the code from over at the model view state. So we want to know how far we want to go. And so from the center cell, from the sound center, how far out do we want our sound grid to go? Currently, we will do it 1. So minimum 32 meters, maximum of 64 meters, depending on where you're standing in the current center. Like before, refreshing our memories. Whereas, this block we're standing in is the center, and then when we have radius 1, that means we're going to be loading the sounds for each of the 32 meter columns around us. 9 values in total. So we keep these grid filters in a 2D array, which is going to be 3 by 3 ultimately. So if we go over, follow the trail of grid filters over here, we see how it's set up. Yeah, so reset model filter is basically what we want to do here with the reset sound filter. I'm just going to put these out here so we can move them in as we go. So the size of our grid is going to be the sound grid radius times 2 plus 1, right? Our center cell, and then sound radius either side of us. And then we create the grid filters. And then, so we keep track of things in a grid so that we can keep old values if we want to. But then ultimately they need to be in one big array, so we do both. And then, so we run through. I'll just copy this. So we run through this from the sound center. So this is sort of the low. If you imagine the 3 by 3 grid we're talking about, this is the lower corner, the minimum corner of that. And so that lets us, offset into that based on our grid cells. So for every one of these 3 by 3, we figure out what cell ID that is based on its world location, and then we add a filter for that particular bin ID that's stored in the spawn position. And so we build up this list of grid filters, the array of grid filters, and then in this case we'll set the sound set filter, all of our filters. So recapping, reset sound filter builds the list of component filters for each of the different grid cells we want, and dumps them all together into setting the filter on sound container. Sound container, I believe entity container has the filter stuff already, but let's just check and make sure I didn't add that as part of. Oh no, it's normally a protected method, so we have to expose it. Java lets you do this: override a protected method and make it public. Then we have to call the protected. And while we're here, I'm going to do a similar thing and expose the sound view array. This will allow us to iterate over all of the sounds we're monitoring without having to create an iterator every time. It's a free way to save some garbage. So this will set up the filters It won't move. We don't really have any audio nodes to reset relative coordinates. We haven't done anything. We haven't created an audio node. It has no position yet. That's what we'll do next. First, I'm going to make sure this compiles. Gosh, I hope this is interesting for folks. All 3 concurrent viewers. So, yep, compiled. That's unusual. It's a lot of cut and paste code, but okay, so we're just going to look at model view state one more time to make sure there's nothing else I'm missing from that train of thought. So we reset the model filter. In update view position, that's all they did. In update, yep, that's all we did. And yeah, so these are all things related to something else. Yeah, so we keep track of, this is for the debug HUD. If we looked up mob count, we create like a debug value in the debug HUD. I think we'll do the same thing for sounds, because I think that's useful. Okay, so yeah, create your debugging as you go, kids. It's always a good idea. So sound count, and then sort of, okay, cool. So already built in is this debug HUD state, which is an app state JMonkey engine thing, which is part of the SIO2 libraries, which are open source. And so in here, you know, we can grab that debug HUD state and create a little sound display on the right side of that debug HUD, where all that other, you know, when we run the game and on the side there's all those weird numbers and stuff. So we can create a new entry there this simply. I believe I'm going to have to import that stuff. And so then, like mob count over here, if we, in our update, you know, after we update the view position, update the sound container, then we can see if we are tracking sounds, then we can set them to the size of the sounds. And already this will let us see something. I think even the filtering should work. And we should see these release. If we were to go outside of the grid where those objects drop off, we should see them release because we are outside of the filter range. So our filter should be working even though we don't see sounds and we don't have anything visual going on. We can see if everything's working. Oh, except for suddenly, oh, so warnings, I gotta get rid of the warnings because that's gonna be normally. Okay, I gotcha. Version reference, version holder. One of my big mistakes in life was putting this version stuff into Lemur instead of making it its own library. It's just like a handful of interfaces, but I use them everywhere, and so I end up importing lots of these version related classes into other things that don't even do UI stuff, and I kind of wish that they were their own library. Super useful things to just watch things without having to worry about listeners and events and all that crap. All right, what was I doing? Oh yes, and I'm going to add the unchecked filter here because you cannot get rid of these particular warnings. Component filter is a parameterized class, but Java doesn't like arrays with parameterized classes, so you end up just getting rid of them. Suppressing the warnings. Okay, while it runs here. Come on, you can do it. There it goes. That took a while. An unusually long amount of time. Oh, you know what else I should do before we go too much farther? So I should go in here and set muted default. So next time we run, we'll actually hear sounds. Because it's going to become important here pretty soon as we're adding sound effects to the game to be able to hear those sounds when we walk around. Alright, so when we are here, we should now have a sound count for these two guys. If we have sounds, only 0. That's disappointing. Set the sound tool. Let me set a new one just to see. Okay. So there's something wrong with the existing objects, because when I did that, we saw a sound pop up. I know what's wrong. It's managing all the sounds, but we don't set the count when we start up. So what happens is when actually it's interesting that it's set that at all. Oh, so in update, right. Yeah. That should have set the sound size. I don't know why it did not. Because update view position would have set the filter. Well, first let's look at the logs. So, yeah, interesting. It's not getting that initial set of stuff. We only got the one sound we added and not any of the existing ones. Should be enough to test, but is also annoying. So let me just double check. There wasn't something else we're supposed to be doing with the models, with the sounds. So we created the container, we started it, we updated it. Yes, we don't have to do that yet. We set the filter when we move. Yeah, so all that's good. And update view position. We only call it from initialize, we set to true, and here whenever the position updates. And we log center world, which we only logged once. Alright, let's see if we move out of the grid and back in again, if it works. I think I might know what the problem is. Hey, it sounds working again. I think I know what the problem might be. I suspect these sound objects are no longer sound objects. Yeah, I really need to load that in the background. Alright, so yeah, we have 0 sounds again, and I bet if I move out of the grid, it still stays 0 sounds. If I move away, and they disappear, hold on, we want to be able to see them while we do this. Okay, so you still see them, they go away, and now we come back. They come back, and we still don't see any sounds. So what we will do is add a little debugging because I will show you what's wrong. See if you can guess what is wrong with those objects. And maybe as I add the debug code, you'll clue in what's going on. So where's the sound one? We never added anything special for speakers. What is the yes and no. The logging does slow it down a little bit, and I usually go through a pass of getting rid of the stupid amounts of logging before I cut a release, just for that reason. But when the Windows is weird, when most of the terminal is covered up, it doesn't have to draw very much, and so it goes very fast. Versus, if I had this fully displayed, it slows it down. It's weird. But mostly on Windows. By Windows 7, the command line is pretty fast. It doesn't slow it down too much. What was I doing? Oh yes, we want to change. Let's change our own look. Okay, so first what we're going to do is when we created this sound one places a speaker. The speaker has this object type speakers, which we never actually created an object type for, so it's just a default. So what we will do here is we will create a new type, and it's not an item. We can't pick it up and put it in our inventory. It's just a base object. And what we will do is we will override the look, and instead of the look that it normally does, we're going to do some different things. Yeah, let's just take the whole method. Normally you can call the original method and add your own stuff to it, but it's a little trickier in this case because we're trying to show a dialogue to the player. And I don't care about any of this stuff, so what I'm going to do is add lines plus equals sound object sound info. So let's look at the sound info component. The thing that defines this as a sound, two things, right? It's got to have the spawn position. It's got to have the sound. I suspect that it does not have the sound, and I already know why. But I already know why that would be true. But I want to see it. It's not enough to fix a bug unless you can prove you fixed it, right? It's the kind of things you lose sleep over. So if we go in here, oh no, my script is buggy. Oh. Yeah, not sound one. I'm an idiot. Speakers. I cut and paste that block, to plan on replacing the type, but then I didn't. Stupid things. Keeps us humble. Something like that. I'd say I'd promise to be humble even if I didn't make so many mistakes, but I know that's not true. Alright, anyway, it's getting a little dark, so let's run time back a little. Okay, so if we go in here, we select either of the object tools, we should be able to point one of these guys and say, look, look, and look, no sound. But Paul, why would there be no sound? We clearly set sound on those objects. And when we create a new version of an object, if we looked at that one, it has a sound. Oh, I wish we should put a toString. You seem to have a groovy file. So the way Mythruna is set up is like the core classes, the base foundational stuff is in Java, and then all of the game behaviors that players might want to mod is done in Groovy, especially Groovy Script API kind of, which I think I went over early in a different episode a little bit, a different live stream. Let me just pause here for a second. So like I have this little API I've built to build types and add actions to objects and stuff. That's all runtime sort of typing. And not the API itself, but the underlying script framework or the object action framework is part of the open source stuff that'll be released with Moss. So this is done this way. The client side stuff that keeps track of what colors to set what to at different times of day, that's all done in a Groovy script, mostly so that I could reload it at runtime. But there's this whole mod manager thing that loads scripts at runtime that users can override that to add server commands and console commands, different things, object behaviors, new object types, all that can be done. Yeah, to some extent scripting is even used in generating the blocks, the block types, but that's all done in the, there's a tool where I use to create the blocks and then I compile them down into binary so that I don't have to do that every time the world loads. That was one of the reasons that old Mythruna took so long to load, is because it had Groovy scripts defining each one of the block types, and it started taking a long time to load. Big brain on the bug fix. Sorry to interrupt the haha. Love the system engineering education. What's a good decision? Looking back, was it a good decision? Which, the scripting separation? I like it a lot, actually. There's a delay between. Yeah, it is. It's like a full minute delay. So I apologize for that. I don't know if there's a way to make it faster. But so let's real quick get back to the bug. I'm not sure we're going to get to making sounds yet. Okay, so again, the object I just placed, it has a sound. These objects, they don't have a sound. That certainly seems to me like sounds aren't getting stored, right? They're not getting saved. So if we look at that sound info thing, look at that. What we miss is persistent component. So we were not saving it. It was a runtime only sound. So now, of course, all of those objects we placed are just dead space objects. They're not sounds anymore, so we'll have to delete them, because no matter what, we cannot bring sounds back that we never saved in the world database. So, but if we go in here, we can now make new sounds, and they should stick around. Come on, world. What's going on here? What's scary to me is that when this is happening, it's like my hard drive is frozen. And so I always worry that like it's died for some reason, but that is not what's happened here. There we go. Uh-oh. What's going on? I hope I'm still live streaming. Alright, let's try this again. Seems that Mythruna is still running and not responding. So let us... Whoa, I see we got a ton of chats coming. Okay, cool. So the voxels, I mean, they're blocks. I don't understand the question. I'm sure I have something to say on the matter, but I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. It's Windows 7, but I have the I set it to classic mode. I'm an old Windows NT4 guy, and I think like Windows 2000 was the pinnacle of user interfaces as far as I was concerned. So so they'll drag me kicking and screaming into the cartoon Windows. So, and yes, I do have a lot of tabs open. Okay, look, hey, let's see if we can get the world to start this time. Check it out. Anyway, I'm not trying to ignore the question about Minecraft and voxels and stuff. Earlier in the live stream, I went over how the world is organized, and I'm not sure. I just don't know how to parse the question. So what is the how are you doing your voxels? Yeah, it's the doing part, which narrow it down maybe. Okay. But let me, since you're new, I'll show you something real quick. But first I gotta delete these guys because they don't have sounds. So that we'll place some more one down. So we should have two sounds. If we fly up here, and you can kind of see the grids for those who might be just joining. So those are I think these grids might be what Minecraft would call a chunk, although Minecraft chunks are not in 3D. They're like all the full height of the world, and mine are square. Anyway, if we fly back here, we see those go away, and up here our sounds went away. If we fly back in, we could see, yep, the sounds came back. Okay, so the filtering is working. Any filtering is working. And real quick, so in Mythruna, like I currently have my grid radius for the block parts of the world set to 3. This is not very big, but that's because in Mythruna we have this far terrain, which is hard to see with the grid on. Let me run time back so we get so we can see daytime. I wish I could like fly up in the air and lock my position, but you could see the terrain goes out like 8 or 9 kilometers. All 6 sides. I do render all 6 sides with Mythruna. The lighting and stuff. Technically, I could save a lot of time. Turning some of these into one, greedy meshing and stuff, but I never did it because Mythruna supports non-cube voxels. So you see I've got round trees. You see these objects have wedges. These are actually made in-game, by the way. Like over here you can see I've got these new ones. Hey guys, these are the new ones, the tree trunk stuff that for chopping trees down. So these are not only cylinders, but they've also got wedges, and there's oops, wrong. If I go back over to the build one for a second, you've got not just cubes, but wedges and different kinds of things. Minecraft was so that's a complicated story. I tried making role-playing games with generated terrain for years, pretty much since I started developing and got beyond text adventures and MUDs and things. When I wanted to do graphics, some of the first things I did were diamond square style terrain generation, and I really wanted to make a 3D game where you could wander around and do role-playing game stuff that was randomly generated, because I wanted to be able to play my own game to some extent. Obviously I have a little bit more knowledge than others would have, but I wanted to be able to play my own game and find new terrain and wander around and find new stuff. And so for years, for probably even way back before Neverwinter Nights, JMonkey Engine was, I think, not even version 1 when I first tried it in like 2006 or something. I've been doing 3D graphics a long time, but JMonkey Engine I played with an early version. Yeah, there's a demo out. So the original engine is still around, and also if you hit me up at by email or PM on Twitter or whatever. You can join the Discord, or I can just send you the link. It's not totally public yet, just because I'm trying to limit the audience a bit to avoid some of the backlash of people. It's sort of a scary thing to let it out at this point. But anybody can get it. They just have to ask me for the link. So a long time ago, I used to make all these games. I'd start with 3D tray generation. I had like some quite advanced ideas. In fact, I'd put together a tool for making fractals and so on. And they just never took off because I never got to the game point. And I was trying to make graphics that looked realistic or not realistic. I actually like the sort of the D&D art style, so that painterly. If you opened up the old D&D 3rd edition books, the art that was in there, that's kind of the way I wanted my game to look, which Neverwinter Nights, I think, achieved excellently, by the way. And then I played Minecraft. I think it was version 0.5 or something. I was like, what's all this thing about? And so I was like, oh, voxels. And I had done Marching Cube style, rounded voxels, metaballs, and all that other stuff. I'd done that for data visualizations and things. And it never occurred to me to just how far you could get just making blocks. And of course, I didn't want just blocks. I wanted more because I wanted organic trees and things like that. So I've got round and I was like, you know what? I could get to something really quick. I could create content in the game. In Mythruna, you can actually build. You can build your own objects in the game. So I made this desk by putting blocks together, and I make my own objects. And players can make their own objects and things. All of this stuff was possible because I gave up on the idea of making this look realistic and went with the blocks. And then, as Minecraft developed further, it was frustrating because I was trying to go in a different direction. Of course, you get compared all the time. And there was literally some times where I was like, okay, this weekend I'm going to start working on feature X. And then Minecraft would release that feature, and I'm like, crap. I'll just push that off to later because people are going to think I just did it because Minecraft did it. Literally, the one I always think about is I was going to add rain because I had been working on all these, in the old Mythruna, I'd been working on all the sky and the clouds. I had wind. I'm like, okay, next logical step is rain. And literally that weekend Minecraft came out with rain and snow. And I'm like, and it didn't look anything like what I wanted, but I didn't want to be yet another copying. Hi, Jeff. Yeah, I have apparently lots of twins. If we should start a club. Okay, so usually I try to end this in an hour, but let's at least try to get, even if we can't get audio, we're really running out of time. I'm wondering if I should push this to another night. So, gosh, we really didn't get very far. Let me try to code some stuff real quick. Okay. All right. So we've got sound info. I'm assuming it's working. Let's run it one more time. Those objects should be around. Thanks for keeping the chat lively, guys. This is I appreciate that. Okay. Quick. Come on. Thing is, I'm trying to cut a release by the Friday before Halloween so that everyone has it in their hands if they want on Halloween. I don't think I'm going to get any Halloween content that I wanted to, but I may have some little surprises in store. So we should have, look, we have two sounds. So these guys are actually sound objects now, which means that we don't have to recreate them every time we want to see. So if we view this, look, look, it's got a sound. Okay, so we fixed our bug. Yep, drink is gone, coding stops. Usually I switch to gum, but since I'm on a live stream, I won't chew in your guys' ears. All right, so let's see how far we can get. Maybe we'll extend this another 20 minutes or so. I do still want to show you what I did with the trees. Yeah, and there's so many Block World games now that it's no longer like that big a deal. In fact, I'm sure I'll get compared to something else that's not even Minecraft at this point. But I really, if the people who said, if anybody ever said, this looks like Skyrim and Minecraft had a baby, it's like that is exactly what I'm going for. If I could do that, with all randomly generated content, that's impossible. But that would be my game. That would be my jam. That's what I want to play. I stream once a week, every Friday at 9 p.m. GMT -4. Okay, so back to sound view state. We're going to do two things. So we'll cut and paste a lot from model view state because we're running out of time. And model impl. So we have our... I'm going to add a debug spatial because I feel like if sound's not working, we'll want to at least be able to see something. So we want to be able to see something, so we'll create that, and let me just see the pattern I use. The other thing is I'm gonna look ahead. These so far, the sounds we're talking about are for static sounds, objects that are placed on the ground, not controlled by physics. Physics objects have a different way of dealing with position, but will share the same sound view because physics objects sometimes go from being static to being in motion to being static again. And so usually we keep one sound view around and we keep track of whether it's currently dynamic or not. And we'll have a separate set of objects to manage the mobs, but they'll refer back to these. So we'll just keep those in there for now. When we create a new sound, we did all that, and we want to... So in a model, when the shape changes, we change its view. In a sound, when the sound info changes, we change its view. So instead of shape, we'll do set sound, sound info. Lots of cut and paste coding here. Except for I'm not typing. Yeah, I should have done a search and replace on this. So if audio is not equal to null, remove from parent. So it's called, in JMonkey Engine, it's called audio node. But is it a node? Or did JMonkey Engine name it incorrectly? So audio node is a node. Excellent. Was you not allowed to say what? You can say what? Drink is gone, coding stops, or... I didn't see anything wrong. No. So as far as open sourcing, there's gonna, Mythruna itself is meant to be a way of funding my development. So the game itself will be closed source, but the underlying block code, not the textures, not the specific block shapes, but the underlying block code that generates the block geometry, the world management, not the specific fractals, but the fractal library I use, all of that's going to be open source as part of the MOS package. Patreon patrons get early access to that if they want to poke around at it. I want to get Mythruna to alpha before I think about releasing MOS, because releasing an open source library takes a whole bunch of time. And it needs to be beaten up and given some proper demos and some documentation and stuff. But if you look at some of my old YouTube videos where you're flying around the desert with the town of like 1,000 buildings, all of that was the open source code. So the Mythruna part is the Mythruna specific content, Mythruna specific objects. Some of the stuff that I just didn't have time to turn into open source. Yes, in fact, I have Patreon. The delayed chat is really kind of interesting. So yes. By the way, so let's pull it up again. Patreon.com/pspeed42. Nice. Cool. Okay, let's quickly get back to here. So audio node is actually a node, so I can actually make my debug spatial just a child of the audio node. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's probably a good idea. Put it in the link. Put it in the description. The doobly do, as they say. So set sound, that's all we need. We don't need any of this stuff. All right, guys. You know what? I think I'm not going to play sound. Yep, I will. So here's where I'd create the audio node, but there's a timing issue. So the client is actually like 100 milliseconds delayed from quote unquote game time. I'm making little quotes with my fingers. You guys can't see that. But what we will do is we will, instead of creating a real node, we'll just create a temp sound. And I think we had a root already, sound root. Audio. And we'll create a debug spatial. Let's make a box. Do I have this shape? So we could at least see where the sound would play. There's just so much to do as far as wiring up the listener so that it has position. We'll make a teeny tiny little at least we'll be able to see something. Yeah, okay, we'll keep it going. So geometry box, test box, sound, audio, attach child, box. Actually, let's make it a little bigger so we can see it. That's too big. So 2.25 radius should be half of the meter on side. So audio attach child box. Oh, we're gonna need material, and we will cheat. Do I have lemur? There. So lemur, the GUI library, has this GUI globals object, which I use to cheat all the time because you can create a material really quickly. So we'll create a red object, lit. So that'll be there. Now we have to position it, and this is the tricky part. We want to set position, update relative position, set world position. So we're going to steal all of this code. So two things we can set about this are the sound and the position. We don't need an override. Wow, lots of stuff. Yep, Java JMonkey engine. Game is called Mythruna. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, it's nice because if you want to create an unshaded one, you pass false here. You can pass a texture, it'll just create it, and it knows unshaded and lighting and wires it all up. In fact, this is creating what's called a GUI material, and that's why we have to call get material, because that gets the JMonkey engine material. But the GUI material is implementation agnostic, whether it's lighting or unshaded. You can set the color and the texture the same way. So it turns out to be kind of useful. So I do have a world position already. We don't have parent-children in this case. So there is no parent model. If we already have an audio node, then we will need to we don't have a name node, we don't care about that. We don't care about the center. I removed something I didn't need to. Yeah. So, where's our location? Our location is center of the world plus our center. Nope, we're just center of the world. So, oh no, center X, center Y. So, I breezed by this stuff too quickly. Yeah. But that's not right either. I have a distraction job. I mean, I have a day job that's super distracting. You're not familiar with my history. I started developing Mythruna about 10 years ago. Oh, I guess it's closer to like 11, maybe 12 years ago. Coming up on 12. And then my wife got brain cancer as soon as I opened my company. And so we've been dealing with that for like 10 years. Brain surgeries and things. So our world position needs to be, what are we doing here? Why do I care about the world cell? I'm trying to unravel old code and talk at the same time. World cell, the cell that contains the center of the object. We just don't care about that. We care about if so we can set the world position, that's fine. Reset relative position. Yeah, that was a while back. She had brain surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, very expensive stuff too, even with insurance. So that kind of put development on hold. And Mythruna, the original game, was becoming kind of this monolithic, hard to manage thing, as most projects do when they start out as just kind of a random boondoggle. And so development got slowed way down, and then development slowed way down, and I'd still work on it, but then trying to integrate a proper physics engine, and yeah, I wish, but I have a lot of expenses, like mortgage and things, and my job covers all that, and I have 2 kids and one who just started college recently. Game development would have to be making a lot of money for me to be able to quit. So we do what we can. So anyway, but when COVID came around, it gave me a lot of extra time because I didn't have to drive kids to places. I didn't have to drive anybody places. We were all stuck here. I could sleep in because the kids didn't start school until late, and of course they were doing online school. And so there was a lot that was bad about quarantine, but that was really nice. Getting to so update, we don't really care. We'll call set sound entity get component get sound set position entity. Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm only 10 years into this current iteration of my mortgage. Relative position. Yes, I bet it is. I mean, they always say, with the tax implications. Like, yeah, but you're not paying mortgage. So, um, this is taking a long time. I'm wondering if I should. I don't want to finish it next week because, well, I suppose I could. I kind of wanted to have sound done to start working on stuff this weekend, but it's going to take me at least another 15 minutes to get sound hooked up. So let me just see if I at least compile, because I want to show you guys some stuff before we quit. Some exciting things that are unrelated to sound, except for that they would need sound to be really interesting. But objects, what does it complain about? Do I not have? I always wish that util was imported by default. Nice. You guys are so lucky. I think that if I had my house paid off, I would consider retiring. I want to make... Okay, so no promises because, in modern game development, if a developer says something and it gets taken as a promise and then they get death threats later when it's not implemented. But I really would like a RPG where the systems, where it's randomly generated, obviously, and where the systems kind of like interfere with one another in a way that generates content and goals. Obviously, story is not going to be very thick in that case, but to give you stuff to do, randomly generated dungeons, randomly generated town relationships, characters in that town that have relationships with each other, that kind of thing. All this sort of graph stuff that I do in my day job, bringing that to bear, keeping track of the relationships between NPCs, that sort of thing, to make as close as I can get to block world Skyrim as I can, recognizing that without actual writing and story, we're limited to why. Oh, yeah, of course, can't do it. So we'll call it audio node, and it doesn't even take a attached child box. Yeah, that's not working. But yeah, I want a game I can play myself. I want to create creatures that I have to sit and think about how I would defeat them. Maybe other people come up with ideas and so on. Yep, exactly. But how far can I get generated? And I'll show you some of the... Obviously the world is generated. The towns will be generated. That stuff. No. My coworkers are not NPCs. But there will be NPCs in Mythruna. And the work I do in my day job, or I used to do with graph data structures, nodes and links, keeping track of the relationships between things, visualizing that, and on a massive scale. In that case, it was like, I don't know if you've heard of the Billion Triples project, but that's the kind of data scales we were talking about. Trying to play with that kind of data. So I want to bring that to bear. So when there's NPCs in the game, they'll have relationship to each other, potentially relationships to the next town over. So when you see that thing over there and you want to go over and look, maybe that's a wizard tower, but then there's a town nearby and the town are scared of the wizard, and just simple things that you can build up with sort of systems interacting with other systems, because you've built gossip systems and things within the NPCs, and it's an experiment to see how close you can get to content without actually having to sit and write actual content. because I want to be able to wander around the world and find stuff myself. You know, coming across here, and maybe this is not a wizard tower. Maybe something else is up here. Anyway, you know, have a reason for things to be, not just random. Okay, so where were we? Okay, back up here. So as you see, these are new block types. These I'm going to talk about trees for a second. We're not going to get audio today, unfortunately. I will see if I can finish up audio next week, but I got to look at the schedule because I really want to get audio in by Halloween, the Halloween release. But if I wait till next weekend to do the rest of this, perhaps I can think about the content. I have not seen Starport. I have a limit, so I watch a couple game streaming, like Game Ranks. There's one other game streaming. When I walk on the treadmill, I watch different game streaming stuff just to see kind of what's going on in the industry. So that's like the limit of my. Anyway, so I created these new block types. You can see you can place different rotations of this tree stump, and the reason is because I wanted to make an axe that would chop a tree down. So if you came over here, nice. So the idea is if you had your axe wielded, and you came over here and you chopped the tree, and in this case I'm just going to click it, and it's going to detect that tree, which is just blocks in the world, right? But it detects the tree because we generated it from, you know, so it detected all that tree and would put the, you know, eventually you chop it away and parts of the tree go away. And so, but right now, in order to test, because if I did the real tree chopping, then every time I did it, I'd lose a tree, and eventually I'd run out of trees and have to wander all the world to find new trees to test with, and I want to be able to retest with that same tree. So I just chopped that tree. So you know, I chopped that tree, and you saw that it gave me this message down here. You know, the tree chop flora. It found the tree, it extracted it, and turned it into a blueprint. So if we go into the blueprints, you know, it'll be one of these new trees down here. Looks like this one, I think. And so if you edit the blueprint, you can see that looks very much like the blueprint I just extracted. And so what I've been playing with is making sure this works in the physics engine. So if I come back here, go to the object tool, and find that tree and place it down. Now this is a shrunk down to quarter size tree version of this tree over here, which you can see, plume on top, branch, little branch, plume on top, branch, little branch. And the cool thing is now I can right click on it and I can say make physical, and like, watch, it's falling over, it's trying to fall over. Is it gonna do it? You could give it a little nudge. There it goes. Boom. Now eventually, you know, the branches will crush. That's what I wanted to happen anyway. And the weight is a little off because the leaves, I think, weigh just as much as the tree trunk right now. It has just as much mass. But I just think it's cool. And so you can imagine a full-size tree, you know, falling over and then eventually, you know, decaying to blocks on the ground. But in the meantime, you could, let's make it static. So now I can, like, oh, it's still, there's a bug. That's right. Let's make it an illusion. Yeah, so there's over there again. So there's some transition issues and lighting issues and things, but we're having fun with it, and yeah, so we can knock the tree over and watch it bounce around. Yeah, so I mean, again, the tree cartwheels because the leaves weigh so much. They have so much mass, and so it's very top heavy. But the idea is, let me get rid of this. That's just to test the idea is that if I came over here and eventually the axe will be swung instead of just clicking on things, you'll whack, whack, whack at it. But the idea would be that I come over here and I chop, 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 and the parts of the tree chip away, and then eventually this turns into an object and falls over, and the branches, the leaves get crushed as they fall down, and the tree ends up sort of flattened, or ends up sliding down the hill, or whatever the physics says it should do. But that's what I'll be working on if I have time this week, is when the tree falls over. What were those cut logs? You have some way of splitting the object in half. So these over here, I created a new block type, which is, let me switch over to, inventory, switch over to build wand again. So if we go, so we go here, trunk. So in addition to wedges, I have these, wedge cylinders. So we select the wedge cylinder, and that's a new kind of block type. You can just place it around. But that's going to be when you chop a tree. So when I chop a tree, it's going to come and replace, it's going to replace part of the tree with that, and the top part with the inverted version of that, which I can show you. The inverted wedge. So pretend that this is not separated like this, but so so you'd get like the little chopped out area, and the tree could fall over. So I needed those graphics, and so so I created them. I'm gonna put these back so that if I extract that tree later, it'll find the whole trunk. So that's the so that's why I have all these here. Is these are supposed to be already chopped down trees, but it's just kind of a visual effect at the moment. And so that's where we're going with that. Let me catch up on the. I have like 20 bookmarks. You were down number 2. Nice. So that's what the cut logs were. There's got number 1 bookmarks. Yeah, Vulkan programming is cool. I'm even running an older. I'm still running LWJGL2 version of JMonkey Engine. I haven't upgraded to 3 because it's got some issues that I'm not willing to play with yet. By the way, I'm a core developer on JMonkey Engine, and still I don't want to play with that yet. I just have to focus my time on. I'm really trying to get a push. I really, really, really wanted to get alpha of Mythruna done by the end of the year. And that doesn't look like it's going to happen, but at least like the pre-alpha with most of the features, I want to have the mechanics for how swinging a sword and swinging an axe, and the animations for that stuff set up. I want to have the real world fractal. So I mean, this world looks really cool, and if we look at the map, the world looks really cool, but this is not the real world fractal. This is kind of a stopgap. It's a quick fractal. It generates the world very quickly, and the real version takes like twice as long. And so if you're testing a lot of worlds and deleting them and recreating them, it's just nicer to have a world with interesting enough terrain. But you can see, we can see very far, and all that distance. And sort of these lines on the road, these lines on the ground are just showing that's a temporary thing. It's showing the tile boundaries, the 1024, basically a kilometer. So JME stream now and then, so I don't sell it because it doesn't have any content. It's just, again, like, I had Mythruna before and it was super popular. It got crazy because we'd have a dozen people in the server at any given time creating stuff, and I would be logged in there, and the month that the original Mythruna Engine's network version came out, my development progress stopped. I was playing in the game so much. All development at that point was supporting the server and adding new things, new admin tools and things to make doing that cool. And there were so many people. We had thousands of users at one point, not all on the line at the same time, but there was always somebody logged into the server. It was kind of a cool time, but also very distracting. And so I'm trying to limit that. I really want to get to the point where there's actual content in the game. There's no mobs yet, so to have mobs wandering around, creatures and things to kill or just follow around. Yeah, so yeah, of course the map keeps going, right? This is a kilometer, and this is where we're sitting in right now. And when we go up here, and we look off in the distance, which way is it? Over here. You can kind of see there's like a coastline. Let me run back time so we can see a little better. Well, actually, I guess we're not going to see any better. Anyway, there's a, yes, you can see water over here, way off in the distance. And that's sort of this stuff over here that we're basically seeing the edge of. There's a desert in this area. Oh, Mythruna magic is supposed to be physics-based. Again, this is all pie in the sky stuff, but I've had some similar to way if I can do it right, similar to the way Blueprint Editor works, but to be able to arrange gems and crystals and things into sort of logical state machines that make fire and ice and things. I don't really want to go too deeply into it because I don't want you all to think I'm promising something, but there's a design and I have not tested it. I don't know if it will work. If nothing else, magic will be fairly conventional. There'll be magic properties you can attach to things, but so one of the core ideas of Mythruna is that there won't be any XP. You'll enhance your character as you go by adding things to them, and even your equipment will have slots to add new sort of magic capabilities and so on. So as you go through the world and you find stuff, you will enhance yourself and you will enhance your equipment, and that is how you will gain quote-unquote levels, because I want to avoid grinding, and I believe XP was a solution that essentially caused grinding, and I could probably write white papers on, research papers on that. But anyway, this is Mythruna where it is now. Obviously this grid is ugly right now because I just turned it on for tonight. In fact, let me just do one more thing. Let's turn the grid off, since we know we're not finishing audio tonight, and I can just demo the far terrain just for a second. We're a half hour over time. Anybody who's stuck around this long who is watching this not on the night we're doing it, I appreciate that you followed this far. But let me see if I can show the world a little bit. We'll turn off bloom and we'll be able to see some of the far terrain a little bit easier. Alright. So let me nerd poll. Whoops. Yeah, that's the problem. With the physics-based Mythruna girl, you got to get this timing just right or she bounces off the edge. Yeah. You guys can't even see what I'm doing. It's too dark. Just so you guys are aware, if it wasn't obvious already, see. It is so hard to, anyway, let's turn back time so that we can see. The YouTube darkens everything, so it doesn't look that dark in the real game. Alright, let's see if we can bounce up a little higher just to get us. Whoa, she's falling off again. See what we can see through her body right now. That's not right either. Okay, so let me turn off bloom. Settings, rendering, post. So now we can see a little farther, though fog clamps it at a certain distance. So we can see, if I look in this direction, and you can see that water and sort of, bays and rivers and things. If we look at the map, we follow down, we're seeing all the way over to here, this stuff. And each of these is a kilometer. So that's how, at 4.5 meters a second, if we walked, it would take a while. I have like a list of sort of constraints in the world. You have to be able to walk X number of time in a day, or X far in a day, towns should be this far apart, roads should be this far apart, and so on, that I use as my sort of guidelines. And then, so I've turned off bloom. We can see far away. If I go into the debug settings, we can turn off the far terrain. We turn it down, and you can see this would be the, see if we bump up the black world. Thank you about the far rendering. So if we bump up, this is like old style Mythruna, right, where you could just, you have a max clip of some number of blocks, and then you say, well, what if I want to see farther away? Well, that's where we add the first terrain level with the trees, and then we can add a second terrain level, which take us out to a view. I guess it's about 8 kilometers or something like that. So we can technically see out to about here, though obviously it gets tough to see details out that far. We zoom way up, we can kind of see. Okay, so we can actually see the blocks. I have a, oh, frick, the bug. Yeah, in fact, folks did. The original Mythruna, even the one that didn't have far terrain and stuff, people could donate to, you know, to pay in advance kind of things, and we had lots of donators. As a game unreleased, original Mythruna did very well. I hope to be able to gain that momentum back again and start charting it. But I look, you know, I think about early access on Steam or something, and I don't want to do it too soon. I want to kind of have enough of the core game that people kind of get the idea of where I'm going and don't imagine it going somewhere that it's not. Because I just fear that backlash. Modern gaming backlash is very scary. So anyway, so there's our nerd poll. Let me, if I switch tools, I should be able to fly up as high as I want. But we want to probably go back to daylight. Let's just go just about, just a little after sunrise. Oh, that's a lot after sunrise. Oh, turn off processing. Okay. Alright, so I think I can go up as high as I want now. And we can see these black lines are the tile boundaries on the map. And oh, no, the bug happens regardless. Okay, so if I go too high, there's a bug. Anyway, those tile boundaries tell us the same as on the map. Yeah, but like I'm thinking of January. So January is when I'll start making the big push. I'm going to try to do a public release. Yeah, I wanted like an actual public release before then, but January is sort of my cutoff, right after Christmas. So yeah, I think that's where I'm going to stop it tonight. I will go and load a different player, a different NPC. So in Mythruna, you can create a world, and you can then create multiple NPCs, or not NPCs, player characters. Currently, there's no easy way to. Everybody's always the same girl. You can't select your. I should. There's one more thing I want to show. So you guys, I'm gonna wander her. She's the one that was wandering around. So if we look at the map again, all right, have a good night. So here I'm over by the map will load in as we go. So here I'm over by that coastline. We were over here messing around on this hilltop up here, and so we can see, you know, the beach and coastline and stuff that's over there. That's kind of what I wanted to show for a second. I had a train of thought back there, but it doesn't really matter. Oh, yeah, so in, you know, the Mythruna girl, I created her costume here in a tool that will eventually be part of the game. Oh, she's all dark. Yeah, that sometimes happens. Let me move her around until she's not dark anymore. Alright. She's messed up. Okay. There's a tool, the rigger tool. Come on. And what I thought would be fun is to sort of make a slightly... eventually in the game you'll be able to create your own clothing. That will absolutely happen. How complicated that is, I don't... how advanced that will be, I cannot say. But there will definitely be custom clothing, without a doubt, because that's the Mythruna girl that you see now is using that custom clothing. And if we load her in here, you can see she's in her underwear. If I load her in here. So this is Mythruna girl with her, pie face that I haven't finished yet, wearing her underwear because, this is the... you can add your own clothing. Like you can come in here and you can say, I want to, let's make some red plaid. You can start painting on her, blocks, and you can layer them up so we can put this over her bra, and then if we decide we don't want that, we can take it off of her bra. And so the idea is that we would create clothing, and we would create clothing, different clothing parts, and be able to dress our characters. Well, what I thought I would do, I really thought this would be kind of cool to get in the game, but it's not going to happen for Halloween. But I thought maybe I could at least make this tool a little easier to run, so you guys might be able to play with it over that Halloween weekend and give Mythruna girl, Fade is her name by the way, some play around with making her some custom costumes and stuff and post images online. So I may get that ready for that weekend of the 30th. So that you guys who download the game can also run this tool and mess with her and create some cool costumes, or just with the limited amount of clothing. We do have like armor and stuff, so you can give her metal plate and stuff like that, and then you can create like seams, ridges and things. Anyway, I thought it'd be kind of cool. Yeah, being a command line guy, I don't do that, but I am old command line guy and Unix guy, so anyway. So I think that's all I'm going to do tonight. We didn't really get much done, though I did give lots of explanations on things. So keep an eye out. I will definitely do another one of these next week, and I think we'll just finish the audio next week, and I'll try to make sure that I'm all lined up for that, and maybe even with some content behind it. Now that we have the sound info component, I can add sounds to things even if we can't see them, or can't hear them rather. So maybe if I need a sound added to something, I'll go ahead and add it. Maybe the fire can have a flame sound and stuff like that. Anyway, I think that's all tonight. We've gone almost an hour over, and thanks for joining. Thanks for keeping the chat lively. This has definitely been one of the best live streams as far as that goes. Hopefully my early explanations on how the world was laid out is helpful going forward for people trying to figure out what's going on. And anyway. Oh, Wes is on. Hey, Wes. How'd you find me? That's cool. I used to work with Wes way back in the day. That's cool. All right. All right. Good night, guys. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. But if you have not downloaded the game and want to try out the latest version, send me a message on any of the online things. At simsilica.com, I am pspeed42. I prefer not to put that in a link description because I don't want to get spammed by it. But if you, or pspeed, sorry, at simsilica.com, that'll get me. And otherwise, Twitter, you can DM me at simsilica or at Mythruna Game, or any of the other places, and I will DM you a link to the stuff. 9 p.m. GMT -4 every Friday is when I try to do this. Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, guys. See you online. if you're working on something, I hope you have a really productive week. Post some screenshots. We'd all like to see it, especially if you're in the Discord. There's a place that doesn't have to be Mythruna screenshots. You can place, there's a clips and screenshots thing. All right. Thanks, guys. Gonna call it because it's getting late. Where is my, there it is. All right. Time to stop the stream.